Welcome to another edition of Hollywood Hoops Laid Back Reaction. I'm Josh Martin of Lonzo Wire. He's Eric Pincus of Basketball Insiders and Bleacher Report. And today's episode of Hollywood Hoops Laid Back Reaction wouldn't be possible without High Five. Not only is High Five a sponsor of the show, but today's video podcast is actually being recorded using High Five video conferencing. High Five makes meetings awesome with insanely simple video conferencing designed for your meeting rooms. It's the easiest to use solution thanks to their all-in-one hardware and intuitive cloud software. Plus, it's a high-quality experience with industry-leading audio powered by Dolby Voice. It's so easy to use that there's no PIN codes or app downloads. Just click a link in your browser and you're in the meeting. Even the least techie person in your company can figure it out.
With customers in over 100 countries, High Five is already trusted by the likes of Warby Parker, Harry's, Betterment, and the Girl Scouts of Northern California. To learn more and start your 30-day free trial of insanely simple video conferencing, visit highfive.com. That's highfive.com. That was free trial of insanely simple video conferencing. I love it. I'm going to get through this live read at some point, like with perfection. At some point, I'll memorize it, but it was almost caught me there. So, Josh, we had a podcast that we just recorded previously, a couple days ago or yesterday, with David Pick, an international reporter, and we talked about the Ball brothers. And of course, since you are one of the foremost experts on the Ball family, LiAngelo and LaMelo are off to Lithuania soon. So what did you take out of our conversation with David Pick? What did you learn from that?
Well, first of all, I think everybody should go back and listen to that because David's knowledge of the European basketball scene and everything that goes on there, how the business works there, is really second to none. And because it's such a different world over there, the way that players are developed, the way that players make their way around teams. There's no salary caps, but there's also not nearly as much money in Europe as there is in the NBA. So it's a very different operation. But I think to that end, the biggest thing that I took away from that was just what the package deal of having LiAngelo and LaMelo play together, the insistence on that, how that might actually be a detriment to Melo's ability to reach his full potential as a prospect overseas. And as David mentioned, there were probably some higher level clubs that would have been interested in signing LaMelo if it was just him and if he was willing to come on a longer term deal, maybe 3 or 4 years. Because at that point, as a European club, you can have him play with your youth teams against players his own age. You can train him, develop him, teach him the skills that you think he needs to learn, help him improve his shooting, his ball handling, his defense, everything. And then once he develops into an NBA prospect, and assuming he gets drafted, then the team can reap the rewards of that by getting an NBA team to pay for the buyout. So there really would have been some real benefit to a European team doing that. Now that LiAngelo and LaMelo are going to a lower level team in Lithuania, that may not be the case. But then again, if Melo goes out there and plays for Prienų Vytautas, which I believe is how it's pronounced at this point, if he has a good 6-month stint out there, then that can help to set him up to play for a bigger club in Europe somewhere next year after LiAngelo comes back to the States and tries his hand at the NBA draft.
Yeah, but the challenge then is that he's playing as a 16-year-old. He's going to be playing against guys who might be 25, might be 30, might be 35, guys who have grown bodies and years of experience. And even if he's extremely skilled, which to a certain level he is, he's a kid. And we saw Kobe Bryant had a hard time when he first got to the NBA in translating his high school body, right? He had just turned 18. It just takes time. Mm-hmm. And so obviously it's not the NBA, but this is not a kids league. And it's not like, I asked David Pick, is it like the G League, the lower levels, the NBA's development league? And he said it's at a higher level than that. And this is a real situation. They're going to be isolated in a very remote part of Lithuania. It's not far from a city, but where they are is very small. And so we'll see. Maybe LaVar is a genius here, and he's got something in mind that will pay dividends, and this is great. Or maybe this is a mistake. Maybe it lasts a month. Maybe it works out. obviously we don't know. It's an interesting idea, and I do think that ultimately it's trying something new instead of just going through the NCAA system where they can't profit off of their own likeness, right? They can't market the big baller brand. And I don't ultimately have a problem with him taking a different route. I don't know if this is the right route, but I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, say this much for the Ball family. They're willing to blaze trails. They're willing to try something new and something different. We'll see how that works out. But, Eric, the Ball family was at Madison Square Garden last night. They're not in Lithuania yet. They were there to watch Lonzo and the Lakers play against the New York Knicks. Of course, the Lakers end up losing that game to the Knicks 113-109 in overtime. And I think this is a story that we've seen off and on throughout the season so far, is that the Lakers are competitive. They're playing pretty good teams in tough environments very close, and sometimes they come through, and sometimes those youthful mistakes come back to bite them in the end.
Yeah, they can't finish games at a high level. They're in games. There's probably been 5, 6, 7, 8 that they've lost in the last 2-3 minutes. Here they went to overtime. Kyle Kuzma hit a big shot. I thought Lonzo played great, really had his early Madison Square Garden moment, then had a thigh injury. I think he collided maybe with a teammate, maybe it was KCP. I don't recall the exact play, but ultimately he wasn't quite the same after that. And Brandon Ingram, it was the first time in a while that we've seen a stinker from him. He's been killing it. He's been playing the best basketball of his career. The length, the size, whatever it was, he really struggled. He made a few good plays down the stretch. Ultimately, they got to overtime, and they couldn't stop Porzingis. And how many teams can stop this guy? Kristaps Porzingis is just tremendous. So they lost another one. It was one they really needed to win to try to keep afloat if they want to have a hope at the playoffs, which you and I both aren't really realistically expecting, but that's something the team's striving for. Their schedule turns even worse and gets uglier. They play in Cleveland, and then they've got the Warriors a couple times, the Rockets a couple times. Very difficult schedule coming ahead. We'll see if they can survive the rest of the year, but this was a game that they had that they probably should have gotten.
Yeah, it's a shame in that way, but there's only so much you can do when Porzingis is popping off, and that's really the next wave, I think, of the NBA, of teams you're going to see take over, is teams that have these unicorns, right? And Porzingis is the main one right now. You look at him, the first player in NBA history with 35 points, 10 or more rebounds, 5 made threes, and 5 blocks in a game. He was marvelous, and the Lakers had no answer for him, and he was particularly problematic for Brandon Ingram. You saw him try time and again to score inside, to drive inside, to do what he does, to challenge the big man, which was great, but he really struggled to finish around that size and length, as you mentioned. So I think that's another area where we see that this is a Lakers team that is showing signs of improvement, is clearly getting better, but there is still a long way to go, just by dint of the fact that these players are so young. They're still not fully developed physically, emotionally, mentally, but eventually, if they learn from these games and they get better as a result, then they can become the team that they are meant to be. And who knows, maybe come the summer, some certain free agent will look at these Lakers and think, maybe this is a team that I can grow with. Maybe this is a team that I can lead to the promised land. And I know on the podcast, we talked a little bit about, well, what if the Thunder decide to trade Paul George if their experiment falls flat? And there are recent reports now, right, Eric, that Paul George, maybe the rest of the league is thinking the same thing about him.
Well, Sam Amick, a friend of mine for a long time, USA Today, really good reporter. He said in an article that basically a lot of teams around the league expect George to end up with the Lakers after this season. And there's a point where, and this is what we talked about in the podcast, which was before the Amick article, where is the line where the Thunder say, okay, it's worth it to try to fight to get an 8th seed or a 7th seed to take on the Rockets or the Warriors and maybe have a huge upset, but probably not. And where is it worth it to say, maybe we should trade Paul George, get a number of assets, and then even if you don't make the playoffs, you get value because he leaves in the summer anyway. If they're not a playoff team and if they're struggling and he leaves for the Lakers, at what point does Sam Presti, their GM, say, you know what, let's cut bait. The main goal here was to get Russell Westbrook to sign that massive extension. He did that. We hit the Grand Slam. It would have been nice to hit 2 Grand Slams, right? But it didn't happen, at least so far. They're struggling right about 8th or 9th in the West. And so we'll have to wait and see. You could argue from the Lakers' point of view, wait it out, wait till he's a free agent, don't give up anything. But then if they're looking to sign a couple of free agents, they're going to have to give up maybe a Randall or a Clarkson or both. And so if you're already going to give those pieces up to get, say, Paul George and one other max guy, then why not get bird in the hand, have that player in your property, in your from a basketball contract point of view, in your house, develop something and work for the future. And, there's always the risk that that player leaves for nothing too. So it's a business where every move has risk. I'm curious to see how the Thunder measure their risk, and the Lakers and any other teams out there who might want to go get Paul George as a rental, what they're willing to give up.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because at this point in time, I don't think that the trade value for guys like Julius Randle and Jordan Clarkson has ever been higher. So if you're the Lakers, then maybe this is the moment to pounce. Maybe not this very moment. And December 15th, I think, will change a lot of things coming up this Friday. It's not just the first full day that Star Wars is out in theaters. It's also the first day that NBA teams can actually trade players that they signed as free agents over the summer. So that's going to open up the market a little bit more. And then we'll start to see what the trade market actually becomes. But that's a couple days off. We'll probably get around to that on the next episode of the Hollywood Hoops podcast. But for now, thank you all for joining us on the Hollywood Hoops Laid Back Reaction, presented by High Five. I'm Josh Martin of Lonzo Wire. He's been Eric Pincus of Basketball Insiders and Bleacher Report. And we'll be with you again soon.
He's on his way, going to Hollywood, he's busting into Hollywood.